A keynote speech can mean a lot of things. To us here at the book festival, what we refer to as the keynote is really sort of the final talk of the day. It's the last taste we want to leave with you as you walk out of here and hopefully resonate with you in the days and months to come. As we did in our first year with Wes Moore, we have again chosen the author of a memoir who brings us themes of transcendence and a story that's both timeless and relevant to our world today. Our 2011 keynote speaker is Matt Logelin, who will be speaking about his book, 2 Kisses for Maddie. Now, in Matt's book, you'll find a story of triumphant love, unthinkable tragedy, its painful aftermath, dedicated fatherhood, friendship, and family. These are classical themes and things that we can all pretty much relate to in our own experiences. But there's also a modern twist. With his blog, Matt Logelin has expanded the boundaries of what we know as community. He's transformed what we'd all recognize as that small, traditional neighborhood support group into a group of tens of thousands of caring friends around the world. The community that has developed around Matt's blog is a testament to the fact that the online world isn't all horror stories and sexual predators perusing Craigslist. It's also full of thoughtful, caring, generous people, a community that very much resembles the neighborly goodness that's all around us. So I thought it would be nice for us, and special for Matt, to give someone from his blog community the chance to bring him on stage. When word got out that Matt was going to be here, I got a message from the daughter of one of our longtime city staffers, Sarah Messier. In the message, she introduced herself as Jill Ward, a longtime reader of Matt's blog. She described what the blog had meant to her, and basically within a paragraph, she'd convinced me that she was the one who should be bringing Matt on stage today. So she's a marketing professional at Whole Foods in Germantown. She's a part of our City of Gaithersburg family, and I'd like you to join me in welcoming her on stage to introduce our keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Jill Ward.
Thank you for having me today. I first started reading Matt's blog well over 2.5 years ago and have been checking in almost daily since. I didn't come to his blog as a widow or as a single parent or even as a kindred spirit in his unique tastes in music. I simply stumbled into Matt's blog from another blogger's blog roll, and I was instantly drawn in, finding myself to catch up on archived posts, mostly in the company of a box of tissues. Initially, I felt deep sadness for Matt, for his loss, and for the path that he found himself walking down as a new widower, raising an infant child on his own. But it was his candor in the darkest moments, and quite frankly, his beautiful use of profanity that kept me coming back. It didn't take me long to realize that I was not even close to his only reader. In fact, this fascinating community of strangers was piecing itself together, sending gifts, offering parenting advice, showing up in cities around the world to walk in honor of his wife Liz, and eventually stepping up in a big way to help raise money for the nonprofit founded in her name. Along with this new community of blog readers, I cried as Matt so bravely shared his time of grief and cheered him on at each of Madeline's milestones. It was this familiarity with his story that gave me the impression that I knew what I was getting myself into with his book, 2 Kisses for Maddie. I had already read and felt the palpable sadness and heartbreak that came from losing his wife, as well as the triumphs of raising his daughter in a way that would make Liz so proud. But from the very first sentence of his book, where Matt proclaimed, "I am not a writer," I realized I was just beginning to understand his story, and I would need another box of tissues. Much like the post on his blog, the chapters in Matt's book are bravely honest and hold nothing back. Also, like his blog, I knew that I would not be the only one deeply moved by his ability to write in a way that could make anyone feel what he was feeling. I found his words powerful enough to evoke physical reactions from me. On one occasion, I slammed the book closed, refusing to read the next sentence, as I knew it would break my heart just as it was breaking his. A few chapters later, I was unable to read the blurry lines through my tears as Matt prepared for the new challenges that lay ahead of him, wondering if I could ever conjure the strength that he showed. And day after day, as he showed up as this incredible father to sweet Madeline, I laughed out loud with his on-the-fly parenting decisions, hoping that one day I could be the kind of hero he was for his daughter. To share more of his story, it is my privilege to introduce to you Madeline's father and author of a New York Times bestseller, Matt Logelin.
Well, she promised she wasn't going to make me cry, and then she did, so I'm not signing her book. Yeah, this is a huge honor. When I got called to do this event, I thought they made a mistake, and I talked to my agent, and I said, I think they called the wrong people. And then they asked me to be the keynote speaker, and I said, they have either called the wrong people or they completely lost their mind. So yeah, I'm here, and I can't believe this because not that long ago, and I was just writing on a website. I was writing a blog, trying to keep my friends and family updated on what was happening in my life, so that they knew that I wasn't damaging their grandchild too irreparably. And so it went from that to this, and it's a really weird thing because I'm not a writer. I truly am not. I wrote this book, I guess. I had a really tremendous editor, obviously. But I wrote this, and I still don't consider myself a writer. So it's, like I said, it's a gigantic honor to be here, and I want to thank Judd and everybody else for believing in me, even though I, in every interview said I haven't prepared for this and I don't know what to say. And truth be told, I still don't know what to say. So we're going to wing this, and I'm going to do my best to make everybody not cry, although I have a tendency to cry. So I picked a chapter that I think is a little bit more heartwarming, and it's something that even in its heartwarming and humorous side makes me cry because I can put myself back in that exact moment. And I hope you'll laugh a little bit, and hopefully you won't be too angry with me. And then the other thing you have to understand is I'm also not a polished speaker, and I'm not much of a I've never done a book festival before. So as I read this stuff, I like to interject things that come to my mind. Like I'll think of another story, and I'll just speak it out loud. So this is not going to be very polished, despite the fact that I have my shirt tucked in or whatever. So just look at the tennis shoes if you think this is a professional speech, and you'll realize it's not. And so the other thing that was mentioned is that I do have a very, I like swear words a lot. And I'm going to do my best to skip over them as much as I can. I've had a little practice as I've read this in public a few times, and so whenever I come to a swear word, I'll add a euphemism that is far less offensive to people of a certain age or of a certain mindset. And hopefully, if you want to read them, you can go through. Also, if you want to buy the book and you don't like the swearing, I will personally redact everything. It'll look like a government document that's not supposed to be out. Just several black marks, and then you'll have like 40 words left to read. It'll take you like 10 minutes. So just think of it as a poem with a lot of black marks. So I'll go ahead and start reading, and then I'll answer some questions and sign some books, and I'll probably talk a little bit about a few of the things that Judd mentioned, including the community, because I wouldn't be standing here without the community of people that helped me after my wife's death. So let me start. And if you haven't read my blog, it's a bit like having an instant message conversation with a third grader. Some would call it poetic, and those people don't know how to read. So to give everybody a sense of how bad things were when I first started writing on the internet to where I've come now, I include a section of the blog at the beginning of each chapter so that you all know that I truly wasn't a writer, and then within 11 months I became one very quickly, and the jury's still out on how well I've done. So, excitement, fear, happiness, sadness, dread, confidence. I felt all of that when we walked up the stairs to our house. Chapter 12. It must have looked odd, a grown man sitting in a wheelchair, a newborn baby in a car seat on his lap, being wheeled out of the hospital. A woman, presumably the mother, walks ahead of them, snapping photos. I'd been spending all of my time awake and asleep at the hospital over the past 5 weeks. And at this point, I'd seen countless new moms in the exact same position I was in. Did you see the nasty look that old lady just gave me? I did, Anya said, laughing. Anya was my wife's best friend. I hadn't given it much thought, but I always assumed that the wheelchair exit had something to do with the new mother's inability to walk out of the hospital on her own. What I couldn't figure out is why I had to be pushed out of the hospital. What's with the wheelchair? I asked the NICU nurse as I complied with her directions and sat down. She explained that it was done for liability reasons. Apparently the safest way for a baby to leave the hospital was in someone's lap in a wheelchair. I had to laugh. The hospital staff didn't trust me to walk out of the building, but they were going to let me take my daughter home? Sitting there, I wondered if this was the same wheelchair that should have delivered Liz safely to our baby exactly 2 weeks ago today. After saying goodbye to the NICU staff, I asked the nurse to push me around the hospital so I could show Madeline off to all the friends I'd made during my time here. We stopped by the high-risk ward to say goodbye to Liz's nurses and went to the cafeteria and coffee shop to thank the staff for taking such good care of my family. My dad pulled my car up to the entrance of the hospital just as the sliding glass door opened. After she pushed us through the doors and onto the sidewalk, the nurse patted me on the back, making it apparent that I had been granted the freedom to walk and carry my baby. I stood up, both hands squeezing the handle on the car seat as if loosening my grip meant that my daughter would somehow disappear from my world. My eyes adjusted to the sunlight, and I looked up at the sky. I pulled the shade of the car seat over Madeline, knowing that Liz would have been concerned about the sun hitting our baby's bright white skin for the first time. I turned around, said goodbye to the nurse, and walked toward my car to secure Madeline into it for the first time. I was worried that I installed it incorrectly, so I gave the car seat a few gentle wiggles before fully satisfied that I had successfully gotten the thing in and went around to the driver's side. Dad and Anya would follow us home in their own cars. This day had come much more quickly than I had anticipated, even though I'd spent a ton of time learning how to feed, burp, change, and even perform CPR on Madeline. I didn't even feel close to ready to bring her home. I have to pause here just for a second because my father-in-law read this, and his favorite story in the entire book got cut out. And so I don't know what that says exactly, but I always promise him that when I read this part of the book, I share with the crowd the story that got cut out. So a couple of days after Liz died, her family, both her parents, and my parents, who were divorced, with their new spouses, actually, they all came out to LA, and they were going to help me get through this situation as best they could. So these 6 people joined me in a Baby CPR class, and I'd been thinking that this was going to be my lifeline to figuring out how to raise this child on my own. I thought these people are going to be there. They've done it. They raised me. They raised a couple other children, and they've done so with moderate success. So I thought, if they can help me through this, then I'm going to be okay. And so we're in there, we're doing the CPR on these little babies, the dolls, not real ones, thankfully. And Liz's dad started doing chest compressions, and you're supposed to do it with 2 fingers, I think, if I remember correctly. And he collapsed the chest of the CPR doll, which was hilarious to them and to you also, and also hilarious to me at this time. But at that moment, I thought, I am so screwed if these are the people that are going to help me raise this child. So, yeah, he really likes that story. It points to the fact that these people have no ability to help me. Since the day she'd been born, I'd been told that Maddie might end up staying in the hospital until her actual due date, 7 weeks later. Now she was coming home after only 14 days, barely bigger than she'd been at birth, just over 4 pounds. Sure, I was looking forward to bringing her home with me and getting her out of the hospital, but I needed more time to get ready for her arrival. When the NICU doctor told me that she was being discharged, I presented the hospital staff with every excuse I could think to delay the inevitable. She doesn't have any diapers at home. I don't have a car seat for her. My dad is painting my house. I don't have any smoke detectors in the house. Are you sure she's ready? Are you sure I'm ready? These weren't actually excuses. They were truths. Well, the one about the car seat and the smoke detector weren't really true, but I thought they were the best shot I had at buying a few more days. All new parents have doubts, one of the NICU nurses reassured me, which of course I knew, but my doubts were a little more pronounced than most. The nurse knew about Liz's death, but she failed to recognize that I wasn't emotionally stable enough to grieve for my wife and take care of our newborn. Still, she insisted that Madeline would be going home with me that day. I took my appeal to the NICU doctor on call. There's no medically necessary reason to keep her here, he explained. The sooner you can get her home, the better. The most dangerous place for a baby is in the hospital, but if you really think you need it, I can buy you 1 more day. The most dangerous place for a baby is in the hospital? I could think of several places that had to be more dangerous than a hospital. A lion's den, Skid Row, the middle of the 110 freeway, and my not yet baby-proofed house. I left the jokes in my head, figuring that this was not the time to demonstrate that I still had a sense of humor. Yet people were surprised by that after my wife died, that I could still make a joke. It wasn't the first day or the second day, but probably on the 3rd day I was I was trying to find a way to survive this. And for me, humor helped a lot. I'm not really that funny of a guy, but my friends are. And so I had to encourage them to tell me jokes and to make sure that I was being, that I was okay, and I think that was really helpful. But it's funny how people around you, when they don't know you, think that death should turn you into this like complete zombie who has no sense of humor and no emotions other than sadness. And so, sorry if you thought this was going to be a really depressing conversation. I'm going to try to make you laugh too. 2 weeks in the hospital with the aid of doctors and nurses had taught me a lot, but I knew that one more day wasn't going to give me all the answers. Hell, one more year wasn't going to get me where I hoped I'd be. When Liz was alive, I never doubted the fact that I'd be a great dad with her help. But after she died, I started to worry that I was going to fail her and our baby. I was convinced that I didn't have any sort of inborn abilities to raise a child successfully. And apparently I wasn't the only one who thought so. Well, my family and friends seemed confident that I was up to the challenge, encouraging me as if simply telling me I would do well with Madeline meant that I actually would. Others were not so sure. A few days after Liz died, a woman saw my mom crying outside the window of the NICU. "Is your baby okay?" she asked. "Oh, that's my granddaughter," said my mom. "She's doing great." I also have to point out here that my mom loves this part because she thinks she looks young. Then I remind her that she looks like my wife, apparently, to this woman who had never met Liz, thankfully. But it kind of creeps me out that somebody would mistake my mother for my wife. My mom always wanted to strike up conversations with strangers, volunteered the entire story. When she finished, the woman, stone-faced, asked, "Is your son going to give the baby up for adoption?" I faced that a lot, actually. I think a lot of people didn't expect that I, as a father, could do it. Even people who didn't know me. I think the people who knew me and didn't expect me to be a good father, that made sense. But the people who had never met me, I thought that was pretty insulting, actually. But if they had known me, it would have been appropriate. Anyway, when I heard the story, I was furious. Give her up for adoption? What's wrong with people? Sorry, there's a swear word in that sentence. This woman's reaction and many others left me with a rankling feeling that I had something to prove, not just to those close to me, but also to the world, because I knew I would forever be judged as being incapable, if not completely incompetent, unless I was great. I had to be better than great, though. I was going to be the best father there ever was. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but as my blog got a little bit more popular and people started reading it, I had this real need and desire to dress my daughter in a way that kind of demonstrated to the outside world that I was taking the time to dress her in a way that, meant that I was spending time with her, Sorry, I'll pause while this train goes by. I can hear my daughter back there, too. She's... Not that what I have to say is that important. I just thought the cameraman might appreciate the pause. Anyway, so really I took the time to make sure that my daughter's socks matched her bow and that all of that matched the outfit that was on. And I did all this stuff, which seems a little ridiculous, but really if I could dress her in a way that showed that I was taking the time each morning to spend that time with her and to be with her, it proved to the outside world, without saying much, that I was doing that. I was spending the time with my daughter. And they had no idea that I may have been, and I wasn't, but I could have been cooking meth in my bathtub. But if I dressed her well and I took care of her in a way that made sense to people who didn't really know us, they would have that feeling that I was doing great. So I knew I was doing well, and I knew I was taking care of her in the best way possible, but nobody could question it if I dressed her well. And my editor, actually, the person who edited this book, hates children. And she said, the only reason she likes Madeline is because I dress her well. So you can thank a well-edited book because I dress my daughter well. It's amazing how these things happen. So after promising that I'd be the best father in the world, I made this promise to Madeline as well. So we're back in the car. I'm leaving the hospital. Sorry, we got sidetracked a bit. I pulled out of the hospital driveway and headed toward the freeway, completely alone with Madeline for the first time. No doctors, no nurses, no friends, no family. I thought about how this moment should have gone. Liz should have been back, one hand on the car in the back seat, one hand on the car seat, the other hand making sure Madeline's head wasn't bouncing around, telling me to be gentler as I downshifted. She should have been here, cooing at our daughter and relaying every reaction to me. But my wife isn't here, I thought, snapping back to reality. There were several other routes home I could have chosen to take, but I felt compelled to drive past where Liz's funeral had been held. I don't know if I was delusional or just crazy. As soon as I saw the parking lot, I began crying and shaking uncontrollably. If this wasn't a kick to the nuts, I don't know what it would have been. Driving under the influence of irrepressible grief was a lot like it must have felt like to drive drunk. I was dizzy and couldn't see straight. I struggled to regain my composure, gripping the wheel as tight as I could, trying to keep my car headed in a straight line and doing my best not to get pulled over. Also, I'd seen a lot of TV shows and movies, and I guess when you drive drunk, you're supposed to put your hand over the eye that you can't see. And when I was crying, I thought, well, they do this in the movies. I'm going to try that. And so I was crying really hard, and I couldn't see, and I put one hand over my eye, and it actually works. Believe it or not. I managed to make it into our neighborhood without incident, and as I drove up the big hill leading to our house, there was Liz's car, parked in its usual spot. Just like every time I'd pull up to the house in the last 2 weeks, I felt the excitement in my chest that came when I realized Liz was home before me. And every time it took a second for my brain to catch up with my heart, and then the feeling disappeared as quickly as the exhale from her last breath. I backed my car up to park and felt the resistance of an object behind me. Damn it. I hit Liz's car. I'd parked here hundreds of times and I'd never hit it before. My heart started racing immediately, and with one quick movement, I unbuckled my seatbelt and lifted myself out of my seat, arching my back to assess the damage I'd done to my child. She was expressionless and in no obvious pain. Relief blanketed my body. I knew I was being ridiculous. The impact was barely noticeable, but I was convinced that the slightest misstep would forever damage Madeline, and I would be the only one to blame if something went wrong. That's one of the most difficult things I think about being a single parent, and if anybody in this room or tent is a single parent, you understand that it's hard to not have anybody else to blame when your child says something they're not supposed to, or does something that they're not supposed to, or when you cause some sort of physical damage to them. And so I was keenly aware of that. I really struggled with those moments, especially as I first brought her home, because I thought this is really going to be difficult to explain to people when I screw this up. So I pulled the car forward a few inches, finally putting it into park just as my dad and Anya both arrived. I would have been mortified if they'd witnessed the collision. I didn't want to put any doubt into the minds of some of my most ardent supporters. I walked around my car to open the back door, and after a few seconds of fumbling for the car seat release, Madeline was out. I felt terrible after hitting Liz's car. She would have been pretty pissed at me if she'd witnessed it. Then I felt sad that I no longer had her there to be angry with me for doing stupid things like bumping her car with mine. I carried Madeline to the front door, and the instant we walked into the house, it felt different. It felt better. It was less lonely now with Madeline. I'd been in and out of my house several times in the past 2 weeks, and no matter how many people stood in my living room or the office or the kitchen with me, and no matter who the people were, the house seemed empty. I could feel Liz's absence, the gravity of her death weighing heavily on my mind and in my heart, but with Madeline next to me, the house felt alive, and so did I, because now she was home with me, and it was time to start living life with my beautiful baby girl. Getting her home safely felt like a great accomplishment. Despite the smallness of the task, my confidence was boosted by this feat. I was now just a little bit sure that I could handle the job of being a single parent. I'm going to skip ahead a couple of pages here. So my in-laws have been very active in my life, and they've been a very wonderful source of support, and especially in those first few weeks and days, they were really great. But again, they were also worried about my ability to take care of my daughter on my own. And so I'm jumping to the part where Liz's dad suggests I get some help, because I hope it will make you laugh. Sensing my fear, or perhaps trying to assuage my own, Tom and Candy, now back in Minnesota, called to tell me they had worked with a few of Liz's friends to track down some assistance for me. The memorial fund that my friend's wife and my cousin set up had brought in well over $60,000 since Liz's funeral, and Tom insisted that the best use of the money was to pay for some help. You have enough money for round-the-clock aid for at least a month, and that's exactly what this money is for. He was right, but all I could think about was the future, how we were going to continue to live in our house, and how we were going to make it without Liz's income. But I looked at the memorial fund as an emergency reserve to be used only in the direst of circumstances. I didn't want to dip into it to pay someone to do a job that I saw as a labor of love. I got on the phone with Tom. Matt, good news. We found a postpartum doula who's willing to donate one night of her services for free. She heard about your story and wants to help. I had no idea what the hell a doula even was. But I remembered Liz telling me that some of her friends had them before and after their pregnancies. Great, I said, as I looked up the definition of the word. I was hopeful that a doula was some sort of baby sorcerer, ready to impart upon me secret child-rearing knowledge that had been passed down through generations of doulas before. Now if we could find another 365 like her, you and Maddie will be just fine. Maybe. Hey, Tom? Yeah. Did you know the etymology of the word doula is from the Greek doule, meaning female slave? I'm pretty sure I don't really want a slave, even if she's only going to be here for one night. Tom spent the next few minutes convincing me that this woman wasn't really a slave at all, just a kind soul willing to volunteer her time to help someone in need. I really wanted to just start this parenting thing on my own, but after the long day, I didn't have the energy to put up a fight. I agreed to allow a doula into my home to help me with Madeline. Besides, getting a good night's sleep wasn't the worst idea. When my hoped-for savior arrived at my front door, I instantly concluded that a doula was more like a hippie nanny hybrid than anything else. Smelled like patchouli and everything. It was nuts. Minus the dreads. It was kind of a nice thing. We spent most of the night sitting on the couch, talking about the kind of things strangers discuss. She shared with me her strong opinions about natural birthing methods, natural medicine, and naturally raising a child. She didn't have one, by the way. She picked a parenting book up from the coffee table. You might as well throw this in the trash, she declared. Now, I probably would have agreed with her a few weeks earlier. I was a firm believer that most parenting books are useless. If there are any authors of parenting books, I'm sorry, yours is awesome. And if it's for sale, go buy it in the Barnes & Noble tent. Humans have been raising babies for over 200,000 years, and during most of that time, there was no doctors, doulas, books, or websites to help them figure it out. But at that moment, her pronouncement left me seething. The book she held above her head, the book she suggested was garbage, was the last book Liz ever held in her hands, and she saw it as her parenting Bible. And no, I don't remember the name of it, sorry. I gave all those books to one of her friends afterwards. I didn't say anything to the doula because I knew she hadn't intentionally tried to make me angry, but I took it as my cue to exit and tried to get some sleep. A little while later, I woke up to silence and walked from my bedroom into the living room to find her still sitting on my couch. I looked around and was surprised to see my house a little cleaner than it had been when I went to sleep. Even more surprising was that I'd only slept for 2.5 hours, and I had missed just one of Madeline's diaper change feeding cycles. If this doula had generations of baby knowledge, she sure didn't share any of it. She didn't suck at what she did, but I had such lofty expectations from her that she was never going to live up to them. She did teach me an alternative swaddling technique that was rather impressive, but otherwise I found her services basically useless. The next night's slave wasn't a slave at all. In fact, she was an extortionist. The second doula was at our house for 12 hours, and things went pretty much the same as the night before. In the morning, before she was to leave, she informed me that her services cost $60 per hour. US dollars, I asked, only half kidding. She didn't think I was very funny. As I tried to multiply 12 times 60 in my head, she blurted out, $720. $720 for supposed help that paled in comparison to the actual knowledge I gained from the doctors and nurses at the hospital? Yeah, that was the last time she was coming. But the doulas did do one thing for me. They gave me the confidence that I needed. Confidence that lack of sleep wasn't as big an issue as everybody told me it would be, and confidence that at $60 per hour, my emergency fund would run out far sooner than we had anticipated. Most important, because the doulas didn't provide any precious advice or information, I was confident that I would be able to take care of my child on my own. I still didn't really have all the answers, or even know the questions necessarily, but I felt sure that I'd become the great parent I wanted to be. Besides, Madeline seemed pretty easy, just eating and requiring a diaper change at regular intervals. In the hospital, she'd been a fragile doll in an incubator, wires attached to her body, feeding tube in her nose. But after 2 days at home with her, all of that seemed to disappear. She was simply my kid. I knew I was never going to be perfect. I was going to try my damnedest. I think he's done. I made a check out to the doula while she used a green Sharpie to write her name, address, and phone number down on the back of a receipt I found lying on my desk. Give me a call if you'd like me to come back. I told her I would, but I already knew she'd never hear from me again. And so, those first couple of days at home were really a struggle for me, but I felt as if, especially after getting help from people who I thought were going to be experts, I really thought I could do it on my own. But what I found was that in the middle of the night, sometimes I had questions, and I had, not long after I came home with Madeline, I started writing on my blog again, and I wanted to, again, give my family and friends some understanding that we were doing okay, that we weren't just sitting in the corner every day and Maddie was sticking forks in the light socket or whatever.